Yeah, William Wilson is a Montreal-based independent photojournalist and a writer as well. He publishes his work on his Substack, William Wilson Photography, and also the Rover, which is a Montreal-based English language publication
More
that,
French as well.
okay, true, they do a
Yeah.
little bit of French, but they do
Yeah,
really
it's
good work.
crawling up. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, you can just pretty much take it away.
Awesome. Appreciate the introduction. And yeah, I'm William Wilson, also based in Montreal. And I've been covering ICE basically since Minneapolis. I was in Minneapolis at the beginning of March, just a little after things like really went crazy. And so I thought it was pretty appropriate to cover what was going on Delaney Hall just as soon as it started popping off. So to begin broadly, the crisis like really started basically the day that the hunger strike started. And rather than have myself do a lowdown of what is going on there, I'm actually going to read a letter that they wrote from inside the detention center. The letter's dated May 31st, so it's about a week into the hunger and labor strike, which started on the 22nd. Through this letter, we will provide an account of the events that have taken place since the 22nd of May, 2026, when the hunger strike began at the Delaney Hall facility, where people detained have all voluntarily stopped working, assisting with facility operations. It's also, as an aside, there's some grammar errors because it was translated quite quickly, it seems. Um, so back to this. Since the strike began, we have been subject to reprisals, discrimination, mockery, mistreatment, and threats, mainly from GEO staff. GEO is the private operator of the facility. Here are some of the names we were able to identify. Lieutenant L, Supervisor M, F, M, Case Manager, redacted. These are all redacted. M, Administrator, the Facility Director, and Shift Officers, J, in charge of the kitchen. So there, I think that Lieutenant would be a an ICE agent or a DHS agent, and the others are probably Geo Group employees. As we'll get into later on with the photos, there's a very strong overlap between the private operators and ICE, so much so that there doesn't seem to be any difference at all. And that fusion of public-private authoritarianism is a very strong theme that you will see going on with this crisis. Back to the letter. They constantly threaten to deport us, transfer us to punishment units, and move us from one detention center to another. They take photos of us in the dormitories without our consent and tell us that we have no rights here. Through these threats, they are trying to force us to work in all areas of the facility, cleaning, kitchen, maintenance, laundry, floor polishing, and are trying to force us to go down for meals by making us sign a list so they can track who goes down and who doesn't in order to punish those who are not eating. As an aside, it seems that ICE and DHS have been trying to break this strike by transferring anyone who has been participating in the hunger and labor strike to other ICE facilities around the United States. I think they know that the further people are from one another, the smaller amount of communication that they can have with one another, such as the strike leaders, the easier it is to clamp down on the strike, which at the same time they have denied is even happening. Back to the letter. On May 26th, we were gathered in the common room. The facilities director, F redacted, M redacted, and the administrator, M redacted, wanted to speak with them, the leaders of the strike, to identify them. They were upset when we told them there was no leader and the strike was a collective effort. That's why they took retaliatory action against a young man named Redacted, the person who helped with translation. That's why GEO staff tried to take him away in handcuffs, which all of us, seeing the injustice, wanted to prevent by peacefully blocking their path with our hands raised so that they wouldn't take them away. In return, we received from them beatings, pepper spray, and from ICE, a riot squad came up pepper spraying throughout the facility, causing many people to be rushed to the hospital, one due to the beatings and another from the gas. To this day, we haven't heard anything about those people. They restricted our access to tablets, visits, and the common room. They only open it on a limited basis as a form of punishment. As a result of this, we feel psychologically impacted and we are plagued by the fear that they might carry out their threats for no reason at all. Judges, without checking the cases, order expulsion in 2 or 3 hearings, either to the country of origin or to a third country. Also, 95% of bond hearings are denied, claiming that we are a flight risk, even though they don't have actual arguments. Through these rulings, there are people who are here from 3 months to a year and a half. We ask for the bonds to be revised since we are fathers and mothers with no criminal record and we have contributed to this beautiful country. We deserve to be free and complete the process at home with our families, given the expressive amount of time we have spent, given the excessive amount of time we have spent in prison. We could be released even if this means being under supervision, required to report regularly or wearing an ankle monitor. The conditions in this prison are not fit for beings over a long period of time. Medical neglect, water unfit for consumption, food that is past its expiration date and in poor conditions, bathrooms that are unusable, and ventilation systems that have not been maintained. And because of this, we are constantly sick. We demand freedom, a fair trial, for our rights to be respected. So that was a letter titled, "We Demand Freedom," and it's signed by an unknown number of detainees. At its height, there was between 300 and 400 in the first week. That number has ebbed and flowed. It's been both men and women, as well as teenagers participating. And all of these letters that have been published have been heavily redacted because of fear of reprisals. And they've also redacted the names of many lieutenants as well to protect them because they're afraid of further charges and charges that may, if anything were to happen to any of those ICE agents, they could be implicated and it could put any sort of deportation that's hanging over their head more likely. So I'll talk about when I arrived, which was June 3rd. By then, things had really, really heated up and then kind of gotten to this state of unknown, for lack of a better term. The state police had been extremely aggressive in their use of chemical weapons and beatings and mass arrests. And it was so bad that the mayor called it unconstitutional, and he didn't want any more of the state police doing the riot control that they were doing. So then on, it became a weird overlapping situation where you'd have ICE agents and Geo Group doing security one day outside the facility. And then the next day, there'd be Newark Police Department, who are themselves conducting security for any of the ICE agents that are entering. And it should be noted that the Democratic governor and the Democratic mayor are both suing Geo Group to have this facility shut down for non-compliance with state law. They haven't been allowing any health inspectors inside, and they haven't been allowing some politicians in when they want to enter. The mayor himself, Baraka, was arrested in December when he tried to enter the facility, and ICE arrested him. We're talking the mayor of Newark, and they charged him with trespassing. And he himself was trying to enter with health inspectors. So I'll talk a little bit about the shots now. I assume you can see my screen. So this is a shot of Delaney Hall. There is a 24-hour presence of activists outside, and there is a couple groups that do kind of reception, I guess you would call it, of detainees who are released. And there's a large tent full of provisions, food, water, and volunteer staff that are there 24/7. You never know when these detainees are released. I was there at 1:30 when a detainee was released. Um, his family was picking it up, and then there was another time when a detainee was released, and nobody seemed to be prepared for that, so he had to come out to these folks, and they found him transportation home, and they also linked him with legal resources that he likely didn't have. And then there's also activists who, some of which camp out all night, and they'll, basically just tell ICE agents to fuck off as they're going in and out. If it's during the day when there's more activists, like 40, 50, 60, they will attempt to impede ICE vehicles and geogroup vehicles as they go in and out. And those numbers would change quite drastically throughout the day. I arrived once at 4 o'clock. There was maybe 20 activists, and there was a lot of violence despite the low number of activists. And then I was there another time when there was like between 100 and 150 activists, and there was no police at all. And they were allowing, quote unquote, the activists to basically create barricades around these driveways where they come in and out. Here's a photograph on the 3rd. This folder is all from the 3rd. Activists impeding vehicles on the geogroup side. There's two entrances and exits. One is controlled by ICE, and one is controlled by the geogroup employees. And they usually come out in convoys of 3 to 10 cars each, because it's so hard to get these vehicles through because the activists are so persistent. They're putting themselves in the way of these cars, and sometimes they're accelerating into these activists at obscene speeds. A day of doing activism there is just being hit by a car over and over and over. And some of these activists had a lot of courage, and very many of them were heavily bruised. And it was very scary to watch because some of these people were hitting activists at 20, 30 miles per hour and shooting them into quite heavy truck traffic. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that someone gets hit by a car and gets hit by another car and gets very badly injured. So this first night that I was there was Newark Police Department providing security, and some of them were clearly given orders to try to keep the situation as calm as they could. So there was no use of batons. There was no use of chemicals of any kind. Nobody had tear gas or pepper spray or anything like that. They'd clearly seen all of the horrible optics that ICE and the state police have been getting. And so they were coming out and trying to be like as community policey as possible. But at the same time, there would be, mostly men getting in some like very testosterone fueled fuck you, fuck yous. So this is one of those interactions that occurred from a detective. And the detectives were usually a little more cool, but not this guy. And every time the sergeant would see that one of his people were getting a little out of line, he would go up to them, pull them back, say, "You gotta time out, buddy. You gotta calm down." So this is what it would look like when the Geo Group employees would try to get into the facility. Activists would put themselves in front of the cars. They would chant, "Fuck ICE, quit your job," etc. Through loudspeakers. They would bang on the hoods of the car. I didn't see any property destruction. The only car I saw damaged was from a activist that was hit extremely hard, and we'll see that later. And his bum hit the windshield and smashed it because she was driving so fast. This is me getting shoved by Newark Police Department as Geo Group employees advanced. This is a ICE agent. They're pretty easy to identify because they look like, masked soldiers. And it's funny, they drive around like this through the city as well. and they always drive in convoys. You very rarely see them alone. A couple times, if there were activists anywhere near them, they would pepper spray out of the window as well, but they didn't do that this night. This is an activist screaming at some ICE agents as Newark Police Department help provide security around the vehicles. There's no activist getting shoved. This was, I think, a couple seconds before an arrest occurred. Flipping off an ICE agent. And here's another photograph of an ICE agent heading in under Newark Police Department security. So one of the things I noticed about this whole situation is that nobody seemed to know what to do. So the municipality of Newark is currently suing the Geo Group facility to have it shut down. Yet you have millions and millions and millions of dollars being paid by that same municipality to provide security for the smooth operation of Delaney Hall. And I mean, that was crazy just to think about for a second. But what was also quite weird to see were some of the dynamics on the ground with that. And that was in the kind of level of um, the level of I want to be here or not. And something I noticed big time was that a lot of the very diverse Newark Police Department did not want to be there, particularly the Hispanic police, who were, I never saw them engage in any physical violence whatsoever. This cop is wearing a rainbow emblem on her lapel. You can see right here. And you could tell she just didn't want to be there, didn't want to get into any physical confrontations with anyone, and just wasn't allowing any sort of escalation in violence. So yeah, it was quite awkward. Whereas you'd see that some of the white officers be way more gung ho with their use of force, and that was just a something personal I noticed there. This is another ICE officer. There was surprisingly quite a few female ICE agents, which I frankly didn't expect. And this is right as an arrest occurred. This officer right here, who's kneeling over him, was punching this guy in the face repeatedly. I didn't see what occurred that led to any of these charges. And when I asked the officers what the charges were for the two arrests that they made right at this moment, nobody seemed to know the answer. I assume it was impeding an officer or something like that. This is me getting tossed again. The police would get a little gratuitous when they were trying to make way for the cars. You'd be like 3 meters from the cars, and they kept saying, "Move, move, move," and I'd be like, "Buddy, like I followed your orders for so long. I'm in no danger from this car. Like, please stop shoving me." And this officer was particularly handsy with me. Same officer. They're instructed to wear body cams in Newark, and they seem to think that that's useful, provides accountability, as we've seen. There was a lot of police violence one particular night where it's not like if you're getting beat by a police baton, you're going to say, "Oh, at least he was wearing a body cam. That my broken bones hurt a little less." Here's more shoving as an activist is trying to impede a ICE vehicle or a Geo Group vehicle. Henchmen for pedophiles. I saw a couple great signs, such as this one. And at a certain point, on this night, June 3rd, there seemed to be some sort of emergency somewhere else, and a lot of the police left, and like over half the police force. And so the sergeant said, "We have a fire to attend to a couple blocks away, so we have to shut this protest down." And so what they did is they had a dispersal order for anyone there. They said, "You're not allowed to be at Delaney Hall anymore," and they pushed people about 2 kilometers away. And everyone was saying, like, why is our First Amendment right contingent upon you guys having a fire or not a couple blocks away? Um, but they didn't seem to care. And I'll move on to the 5th. So the 5th was the craziest day. I arrived at, mid-afternoon, early afternoon, and I stayed until about 1:30. And this time I arrived and I expected to see Newark police. There wasn't any at all. So it was just Geo Group providing their own security at their exit and ICE providing security at their exit. ICE curiously never ever helped the Geo Group employees get in and out of the facility and vice versa. Here is an activist getting hit by a car, another activist trying to impede. There was a couple hardcore Christian older women who were playing guitar the whole day and had Jesus related signage. Jesus said, "Care for strangers." Um, and she was kind of like rapping but playing guitar the whole day, and it was a curious kind of soundtrack to the day. And the diversity of the people there every day was quite crazy. So like one day you'd be there and it would be a bunch of kind of university age like leftists with like pro-Palestine stuff, kafiyas. And then the next day you'd go and it would be like veterans, like veterans for peace who are all in their 60s. Be like, "I served in the Navy or wherever for 20 years, and I don't like what I'm seeing happen to our Constitution." Like that kind of Democrat supporter. Not as radical or whatever, but when it comes to actually putting their bodies in front of the cars, they were doing the same thing as the younger people. This is the moment one of the activists got hit very hard with a car. This is the moment that he hit the windshield and the windshield actually smashed. What happened then is he got launched into traffic, and then a bunch of Geo employees came out. You can identify them usually by their white shirts, but their blue shirts, but sometimes they were wearing black shirts, white shirts. And so there's a couple brawls that happened with activists. They would come out with batons, pepper spray, metal poles, baseball bats, and they would just start beating the crap out of activists. And sometimes the activists would be trying to defend themselves and they would start fighting other activists because there was no proper uniforms. So you're seeing just incredible chaos, but also very confusing. This guy's dragging this guy's hair up in the top right. And the activist on the top left there is actually trying to de-escalate the situation. But this guy, as you can see, is really heated. And he does not heed the call. Right here, there's a couple Geo Group employees that are headlocking another guy who was defending himself. He's headlocking there, I'm on the right, and the guy on the left is punching him in the face. The security guard in the middle, who is some sort of supervisor wearing white, was actually trying to hold back the gentleman in the middle. And he actually physically carried him away. And this guy kept trying to de-escalate sometimes. He'd be like, "Guys, calm down, calm down." And they just kept running into these activists and fighting them. So optics, he's probably like, this is a little too much for me. You guys are creating a bit of a legal issue with liability, especially when there's so much media there. And these guys are just fighting people. They came out to fight. There's no reason at all other than someone hit someone who was in front of a car, which is not really a viable defense in court. Here he is again, getting headlocked. And again. At this point, the guy who originally tackled the person who got hit took out a baton and he started beating this guy on the ground with his baton. The guy on the ground is you'll see he gets it real harsh. And the worst injuries I saw um, on behalf of the activists were all incurred when they were on the ground, when they were defenseless and not fighting back. Um, Funnily enough, you can see the security guard here in the white, the supervisor. He's carrying away the guy that was punching the other guy in the face because he's like, "You've had enough, buddy." The testosterone flow is so high. Um, you got to get out of this melee. But at the same time, you'd see these guys the next day. So if the supervisors really don't want them doing this stuff, you don't put them in a situation. You don't give them a baton and say, "All right, the gate's open, go run out." This is the lady who was driving the car. Originally, she took out a can of pepper spray and started pepper spraying everyone, me and all her colleagues as well, in the middle of the fight. It didn't help the situation, didn't help de-escalate at all. This is the same brawl, just continuing. Um, these people have a CERT acronym on their shirt, and they usually had more serious weapons. I assume they do the sort of heavy security inside of the facility, and they seemed a lot more willing to use violence just for, just gratuitous reasons, just violence for violence sake. Uh, this guy's pinned to the ground and he's punching him in the face. And now the lady in black took out her large pepper spray can and she's pepper spraying this man who's pinned. The guy on the right is breaking his wrist. And the guy on the left with the baton is striking him in the face with the baton. But that pepper spray is getting absolutely everywhere. It was all over me and her colleagues. Uh, After that guy, she walked over to this guy who was also being pinned and pepper sprayed him extremely close. Same interaction. And I didn't get a good photograph of this guy getting pepper sprayed, but this was the most gratuitous use of the pepper spray that I saw throughout the day. He was down and out. He was one of the original brawlers, and he was fighting these security guards as they came out. But he was like on the ground and kind of tapped out from the fight at this point. And then the lady in black walked over to him and just pepper sprayed him in the face for no reason at all. And I don't know if you guys have been pepper sprayed. I'm sure you've been to some protests in your life, but it's really hard to describe how much this hurts. Every inch of your body that has it is stinging like you have never felt in your life. And he was screaming at the top of his lungs. Luckily, there was quite a few medics there. At any point in time, there's probably 2 to 5 medics, depending on how many people are there. And basically, the number one injury that they deal with is chemical weapon exposure. But this guy's going to be feeling that for 3 to 5 days after that, and might have extended injuries. So all of this stuff was at the Geo Group entrance, and we haven't even got to the ICE portion of the day. So some vehicles were exiting, or this one is entering the ICE part of the facility. And the activists, there would be a couple activists at either entrance, and they would scream, "All right, I see them getting ready for some vehicles to enter or exit. Time to come over here." So the activists would run and they would try to impede these vehicles. And so this young lady was impeding one of the vehicles. And what happened here is that a bunch of ICE agents from within the facility came out, a couple dozen, and they come out with just every manner of weapon that you can imagine, from pepper spray to tear gas to beanbag stuff, rubber bullets, just oh, and live. They have a usually have a couple assault rifles with live ammunition as well. And they would proceed to shove people out of the way. Um, a lot of move back, move back. HSI would be um, Homeland Security investigations. So these are all ICE, but they all wear different tactical gear because it's like a video game for these guys, so they get to choose their loadout at the beginning of each round. Some of them would wear jeans and a t-shirt. Others would wear more military gear, like they're in Iraq or Afghanistan. Here's another activist. Uh, a lot of a lot of gas masks were worn by press as well. Goggles were a must. I always wear goggles as a photographer because I need my eyeballs. And here is right after they came in. So here's later in the day. Uh, what the activists would like to do is show solidarity to the inmates, the detainees. I shouldn't call them inmates because they're not technically convicted, right? But they would quite often, as you might have seen from any other coverage, they would stand at the windows and they would flicker the lights with the music. If there's any drums playing outside, they would try to play it at the same time. People would speak in Spanish and say, "We're with you. We're asserting our solidarity." And it would get pretty fun sometimes. Like there would be some beats going on for like 5, 10 minutes where like people were dancing with one another and be waving their arms, be quite joyous. And then, of course, 5 minutes later, the mood would change a lot if ICE was coming in or out of the facility, and all of a sudden it would be quite a scary situation. Here's another point where ICE came out. At this point, there had been some very serious barricades erected by the activists outside of the ICE entrance. They were taking various traffic implements, um, the stuff they use for full of sand that they use for traffic bollards, and they were putting them in front of the ICE facility. So if ICE wanted to come in or out, they had to bring 2 dozen officers and they had to move every single brick, every single piece of barricade. And that would take 10 minutes sometimes. And they did that a couple times that night. Here you see a more typical ICE outfit, jeans and a t-shirt and a beard. They beat this person on the left pretty bad as well. After this person got beat up, they got a couple baton strikes. They still persisted in screaming at these ICE agents. So I saw quite a bit of courageous folks where I was like, man, ICE has been running out and snatching people throughout the day. They arrested probably 3 people that day. Like I was like, buddy, I know you're angry, but like you want to get dragged in there? It's looking like that's pretty likely. A lot of people were using flash photographers, and you get like something called banding. I'm not a flash user myself, but it created some cool effects like you see at this time where it overexposes the shots. This is ICE retreating back into their facility. And then once they were almost back inside the facility, one of them pointed at one of the activists, and then they started charging once again. And they came out and they beat this photographer here, Olga Fedorova, a friend of mine from New York. There was unbelievable amounts of press. It was at some points it was like 30-40% photographers and some of the best in the world. And a lot of them are quite fearless as well. So they would get very close to the lines of police because they're more used to it than, regular citizens. And very often ICE didn't give a crap who was in front of them. They would hit them nonetheless. So I got bashed around quite a bit. Later that night, this guy wearing the Black Lives Matter shirt, he got snatched and dragged into the facility. They said it was for attempted assault, which I'm not sure is a charge that even exists. And this is another guy here, the guy in the black shirt. He's being dragged into the facility. It was another snatch when they emerged from the facility of Delaney Hall, and they just arrest someone. And sometimes the people don't know who these people are. They don't have a buddy there. And they'll say, "What's your name? What's your name?" as he's getting dragged in. And there's so much screaming and so much pandemonium that's occurring that you don't hear the guy's name. And then the activist would say, like, "Do you know this guy that got arrested?" Like, no, no. And so it's pretty scary to see this snatching stuff. And the police themselves are not saying what the charges were either. And they're being dragged into a facility where, there's been quite a few natural causes of death. There's very, very widespread allegations of violence, beating for no reason. And ICE, of course, has killed very many people and shot many people in the United States in the past year or so. So it'd be pretty scary when you see a bunch of guys that look like this just dragging someone into a jail. This is right after that. The ICE agents deconstructed the barricades, and as soon as they went back into the facility, the demonstrators again just started rebuilding it. And this is one of the concrete and sand-filled bollards that were around the area. And they would push the sand down onto the ground, and then they would take those big yellow barricades and they would put them in front. So it's just trying to waste the ICE agents' time because they know that ICE is going to win every time. They know that Geo Group vehicles are going to get in, but it's not about impeding their vehicles so they don't get in. They would tell me repeatedly over and over, all they're trying to do is make these guys fucking miserable, make them not want to go to work and impede detainees like getting brought into these facilities. And it seems to be working. Like these guys are not having fun. Here's another Geo Group employee getting harassed as they come in and out. I guess this is from earlier. This is when the guy was getting treated for pepper spray. But there's not a lot you can do. You can just pour water into someone's eyes, on their face, saline water. There's no magic cure for pepper spray. And you got to be really careful as well, working with eyes. Because if you rub too hard, you can create some retinal damage. Here's ICE agents moving those bollards. And here's later in the day as people attempted to impede the Geo Group vehicles. This is a Geo Group employee probably a security guard who's just pepper spraying out his window. Nobody was in front of his car. Nobody was beside his car. He had a can of pepper spray and he wanted to use it. So here it is. He pepper sprayed me and three other photographers, but no activists really got it except for this one who's right in front of him. So there's no reason to do this at all. There's no threat to his life or anything. It's just violence for the sake of violence. There was another security guard who left the facility, and he pointed a handgun out his window as he drove by. He circled back and uh, he pointed a handgun out his window at the activists. So I've been a photographer for about 11 years. This was like the first day where I thought to myself, I might get shot because sometimes the cars would stop and these guys would be fuming, like screaming at these activists. They'd be masked as well. And you had no idea what kind of stuff they had in their car, pepper sprayed guns, handguns. And it's not beyond the realm of possibilities that these guys lose their cool, get out, start shooting because they're doing it with everything else they have. Here's another moment of, some positive reinforcement of solidarity with people inside. This is RJ. RJ's been an activist who stayed there basically 24 hours a day. Probably one of the most dedicated activists I saw on the ground there. He was there every minute that I was there. I was there for about 20 hours and he would stay the night, sleep in the grass, help coordinate the, food and water for activists who were there. Here's another point that ICE came out and arrested someone totally at random. But the issue is for activists, like it's tough to really impede them personally when they're coming out. They have so many guns, so much chemical, sprays or whatever that there's only so much you can do if they're going to arrest someone. So I didn't see any like, de-arresting efforts or anything to impede them when they were coming out. Sometimes I saw activists actively trying to de-escalate as much as they could and say like, what did he do? Like, is there any way we can work this out? Can you guys calm down, please? This is getting quite late in the night as well. It's probably 11, 10, 11. So that's June 5th. And now the final day that I was there, we had basically the same thing going on. There was no Newark Police Department. It was just Geo Group and ICE providing security. So here Geo Group comes out and tries to take down the barricades, and they have baseball bats and they have metal rods. And they were really angry because most of them had been impeded when they were coming in their vehicles. So they're just really angry men. Here's them taking the barricades back into the facility so they can't be used anymore to impede their vehicles. This guy's holding pepper spray right up to my face. And here's early in the day at the ICE entrance. This person was incredibly gutsy. They got in front of every car. We're getting thrown around by ICE agents. And these ICE agents have been notorious for following people home, doxing them, finding out where they live, who they are. So to do what this young person is doing and get in front of these cars is, it's scary in the moment, but it can also, like we saw in Minnesota just yesterday, that a bunch of these activists were charged with pretty serious crimes being part of Antifa. And the federal government will pursue these people, I'm sure, well after these protests. An ICE agent throwing an activist out of the way. This dude is getting right up into folks' place in their faces. One time they came out, Pretty much every single one of them had pepper spray in their hands, pointing it at people's faces. But I didn't see them use it. For the most part, as much as I was surprised, ICE was more disciplined than I expected. I've seen videos of them basically beating people up for no reason. There was a little bit of that, but they were a little more disciplined than I expected. And I only saw pepper balls being shot. I didn't see any tear gas or pepper spray used. So it really, really started raining at one point in the night. Serious thunderstorm. Shut down Delaney Hall concentration camp. There's activists smashing or hitting the windshield or the hood of a car. Activists creating another barricade in front of the Geo Group employee entrance. Here's them creating another barricade with some of the bricks that are outside of the facility. And that's one of the last photographs that my camera ever took because my camera was totally waterlogged and utterly destroyed. Luckily, it's insured. That was the end of that camera. So I had to switch actually to my backup camera. So the rest of the photographs are actually in black and white from a Fuji camera. I had to improvise, but luckily I had a backup, and the photographs were very, very different. I had some flash as well. So what happened this night is that at a certain point, the the barricades got so strong that the security guards couldn't even get through at all, and they were just giving up. So at that point, they called Newark Police Department, and they came in SWAT gear and shields, and they pushed people probably 2 kilometers south. And there was a lot of violence during this shoving. They had this great sign that said "Protest peacefully" uh, at one of the entrances to one of the streets. It said, "Please protest peacefully," and the police were beating the shit out of people right under the sign, which I thought was quite appropriate. The SWAT guys were very violent, mostly white guys. There was also patrol officers who had shields, and they didn't want to be there. They were not being very gratuitous at all with the violence. Whereas some of the SWAT guys, probably the gamer type, they were very happy to be there. This young person was on the ground, and the cops behind them were beating her as she was on the ground. She later got arrested. This guy was particularly going way too hard at folks, and he got pulled back a couple times by his superiors for just beating too much. And these activists were taking it pretty hard. They were linking arms at this point, and they weren't making it very easy to disperse the demonstration. And here's right at the end when they got to the end of one of the streets, the police stopped. This person I spoke to for a little bit, they were a combat veteran from Iraq. They were very vocal about why they were there. Uh, a lot of talk about how the police themselves should be on their side and that they should follow the Constitution. This person was also arrested that night. I'm not sure what for. But the police, at some point, their superiors would come in between the riot line and they would snatch people and they would tackle them. The guy we saw earlier quite a few times who was wearing that big straw hat, he was arrested and he was beaten quite badly and he was fully unconscious. His body was being thrown around like a rag doll. This guy, he was utterly unconscious. It was terrifying to watch. But yeah, he takes guts to be on the line as much as he was that day. Um, Showed a lot of courage. There's one of the captains that was wearing white. Here's that strain, same straw hat. And here's right as they started charging. There's that person getting beaten as well. All right, and that's all I have for you guys for the slideshow. There's 80 photographs from 3 days at Delaney Hall. I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I guess it's open for questions if you guys would like.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that, William. That's really crazy, everything that you witnessed there. Feels like a different world, honestly, looking at those photographs and like thinking about everything that's been happening in Montreal. Like, you were just at the police protest here in Montreal. I'm not sure if everybody else has heard that, but uh, the police in Montreal, there's this huge scandal and a bunch of police officers were put on administrative leave, and I think that they still get their pay, but they cut off like dreadlocks of some I don't know, some people that they're arresting or whatever in Montreal, and like we're keeping them as like trophies or whatever. And I mean, that's so, yeah, so racist, so disgusting. But even that is like it's just not as like overtly violent. And like I don't know, like those photos look like you're literally like in a war or something. It's so crazy. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Yuri, did you have a question?
Thanks, Jasmine. And thanks, William, for what you're doing. I guess, wow, I actually don't even know where to start. And once again, I actually should have written down my questions before even raising my hands. But I guess if I have, okay, yeah, three quick questions. Number one, I'm very curious if, when you were talking with some of the activists, some of the anti-ICE activists, when you told them that that you come from Canada, are any of them still recycling the nonsense that Canada is the much better version of the U.S.? And when talking with them about like police brutality, anti-ICE stuff, the xenophobia, and that the RCMP also engages in. Did you talk to them about how about how the great work that they're doing on the front line against
Yeah.
fascism, that they could also be doing more urgent solidarity for Native Americans, which are criminally overlooked in the American left, whether it's Native Americans on the mainland, those the indigenous of Alaska, the indigenous of Hawaii. So I'm very curious about that, and don't know if you are an abolitionist, but all this time, if you were an abolitionist, does this make you even more of a radical abolitionist?
Okay. Okay. That's the first question's really good. The second one's easy, but yes. The first question's fantastic because I would tell people that yeah, I'm Canadian. I had a Canadian press pass as well. People were like, "Oh, I've never seen that press pass. What's the CAJ?" So I would tell them. There was also so much downtime because no cars would come for an hour, 2 hours, and all of a sudden you guys are just sitting together. And I met a lot of great journalists, a lot of activists who wanted to talk as well. But yeah, like how many people told me, "Hey, can you please annex us?" Like was super, super common. Every single person I spoke to in Minnesota, bar none, 100% all said that to me at some point. Every single person. Um, in Newark, I didn't hear that as much, but it was still like, oh, you must be so like, not used to this level of violence. And I say, and I mean this. From what I've seen, I've covered the SPVM for 11 years. The SPVM are more violent generally than ICE agents and the New York Police Department. Um, the level of gratuitous violence that they will just like escalate to is quite constant, especially at protests. And I've personally been very grievously injured. My gear has been smashed 3 times, I think. I have a permanent injury to one of my eyes from pepper spraying from the SPVM. Um, when I told people that, they'd be like, "Oh, I thought Canada was such a cuddly place where you guys just like love hockey and you know, have gay sex or like you just like chill a lot, like you're allowed to be more flamboyant and like express yourself more, especially in Quebec." So telling them that things were actually worse in Canada and have been worse, like way into the Trudeau era, was just shocking to them. And I'd say, I've been doing this work for a long time. Check my stuff out. It's not as cuddly as you think it is. Indigenous blockades have been an issue since I started doing my work as well. Um, so yeah, but a lot of these people were newly radicalized, right? There was a lot of like centrist kind of liberal folk who were, some of them had little constitutions and they were coming up to the ICE officers saying, "You're not following the Constitution," or a lot of people were showing flags, which to like, someone from my point of view, like the flag is sort of an issue and it's always been like nationalism and imperialism are linked quite closely, and that's what kind of led to like this is an inevitable outcome of these sort of politics. But that said, like there are very few like black and white issues where you see like a concentration camp and people snatching people and not giving them their legal rights, not feeding them properly, um, no habeas corpus, things like that. Like these are like 100-year-old guarantees of the Constitution, like going back to the British time. So, like we have a black and white issue where there's good and there's evil, or at least very, very, very bad and should not happen. And a lot of these people are going to see these sort of things and they will, I think, inevitably read more and they will find these new lines of solidarity. They'll learn about Canada, the genocides of Indigenous Canadians, or, you know, uh, so yeah, that's
Well,
that's a
very
great
quickly then.
question.
Very quickly then I do have to ask this: do you think? Because I know I've recently been getting into arguments with people about how yes, Donald Trump is an evil, asshole, but Obama was the supporter in chief, and Trump is just inheriting like all of the tools that he got from
Yeah,
Obama
yeah,
presidents.
yeah.
And
No, totally. I mentioned I had this in my notes, and I didn't actually hit it. But like Delaney Hall was open under Obama and Biden. It was used for different purposes at different times, but it was used under migrant detention. And there was actually a ban on private operators operating migrant facilities. And a private operator, I forget their name, maybe it was Geo Group, they sued to have this law overturned. And the Biden administration backed the private corporation's bid to have private
Unbelievable.
operators operate these facilities. So he completely laid the groundwork for that. Obama deported way more people than Trump would ever have wanted. He just wasn't shooting as many people in the street as it happened. And from what I saw in Minnesota and from the reporting I've done, ICE did want to stay out of the headlines quite a bit. And they were doing a pretty good job of not having, Minneapolis style shootouts, pepper spray, tear gas, total like apocalypse style stuff right up until Delaney Hall. And Delaney Hall, in my opinion, was kind of thrust into international headlines more because of the state police. The state police response was just unbelievable and like just so blatantly unconstitutional to a point where like the governor was like, "Oh fuck, we cannot do that again. My GA is going to have such my attorney general is going to have such a bad time. His workload just increased so much that we're going to pull out and not do that anymore." But ever since then, it's created more. There's a snowball effect. So there's been more activists going. There's been more solidarity from inside the facility, and yeah, the situation is ongoing, and nobody knows what to do. Like that was the overarching story for me is that the police, the Newark Police Department, do not know what to do. Geo Group does not know how to handle the situation, and the federal government as well. They do not know how to handle the situation.
Well, thank you, and I'll make sure that definitely open invite to come on 1+1. I'll make sure that Jasmine and the crew give me your email. So thanks for all you
Cool.
do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate the question.
Yeah, next we'll go to Douglas. If you want to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sure. Hi. So much appreciation for solidarity with so many millions of people on our continent, on our Turtle Island, right? But in my work with First Nations and elders, they've always pointed to about 70% of us live in multi-home apartments, townhouses, villages, areas. We're already living in, actually the average size is about 32 units or 100 people. And so I've always wondered in the group that are trying to raise that public image for around the ICE happenings, whether there's that back organization, that's one, whether there's that back organization to help people organize so they're strong in circular economies, they're not feeding the system with so much consumption, and two, whether there's been an attempt to have dialogues with the other side, both sides now, equal time, recorded and published dialogues, so that the public can see both sides presented. And the ICE doesn't have an argument, but if you present only our side, the public doesn't get it because they haven't heard both sides. Whereas when you present both sides, it becomes really clear. And so those are two questions there. One around livelihood organization, economic livelihood organization, and two around dialogues so that the public can hear from both sides, and they're going to appreciate our side. Thanks.
Yeah,
William.
thank you. For the first thing, I think that like it differed so much. I mean, I talked a little bit about the kinds of people that came. There's people from all walks of life. So there's people that had traveled from outside the state to come for like 3-4 days just to show their solidarity, and they would meet other activists and they would, create new networks, I guess, of solidarity that you could say. And then there was also like the kind of hardcore that were always trying to pool resources. So there was, as I said, a couple tents that would always have food, they would always have water, and legal resources and things like that. Um, as for the second question, which was you were talking about presenting both sides. I'm not sure exactly what like you want the activists to denounce the
What I want is that the side of the right wing ICE perspective, right wing. So that could be any Republican and a lot of Democrats. And hey, we want to hear from you in an equal time dialogue. We want to present your case with ours side by side. And so when the public hears that, they go, oh, hey, I've heard both sides, and the ICE side is ridiculous. But you have to hear both sides reciprocally. Usually an hour and a half makes a good dialogue. And then that allows the public to finally make up their minds that they've
right,
heard
yeah.
both sides.
Yeah. No, I didn't see any. I mean, like I was there in my capacity as a photojournalist mostly, so I didn't really see people trying to engage with Republican talking points that often. And the ICE agents themselves would not speak. If they would, it would be like, oh, you want to like fight me, motherfucker? Like, let's fucking go. Like there wasn't any dialogue at all. And the one time they had a right wing kind of counter protest, I guess you would call it, like supporting ICE, there was no dialogue. Like these guys came in tactical gear. There was fist fights. There was no presentation of any civil discourse that I saw from that exchange. Um, and I mean, there's a concentration camp there, and they're being treated terribly and being denied basic constitutional rights. So I think the ICE's argument that they've committed a crime by entering illegally, which is not actually a crime, doesn't like it doesn't tread water because they're allowed to be in the United States. A lot of them had hearings coming up, um, and they were still being put in jail. And these were like sorry, not in jail, in detention. And once they were put in detention, it would make any sort of case uh, that hearing that they had coming up much more difficult to actually fight because of access to lawyers, family, resources, things like that.
Yeah, thank you. Fargo, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, William, for your presentation. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
I wanted to know if you have any insights into ICE offices opening in Canada throughout the U.S. consulates, I think in four major cities. And also, what is your game plan as a journalist to respond to the more than 4,700 emails in your inbox?
I On the second one, I have no goddamn idea. I guess a yes or no response to everyone. But I haven't done that much research on the first. I've heard that there's quite a few ICE agents operating within Canada, but from what I've heard, they've mostly been within the context of being on consulate property, and that's where they do their work. Beyond that, I think it's pretty secretive, whatever they're doing. Um, I know from personal reporting that many of the embassy staff in Canada really are not big fans of the way that ICE has been operating. And obviously, ICE doesn't have any jurisdiction to go around, but they don't need to because Canada's CBS has been so incredibly uh, emboldened by the Carney government that we don't. ICE doesn't need to do anything here because CBS is detaining and deporting people at a record rate right now. So I wonder how much information exchange is going on that front. But other than that, I can't really comment anymore because I'm not quite sure, Fargo.
Yeah, I also have two kind of questions. First is, I guess, like, did you have any issues at the border with like taking these photos and then I don't know, maybe getting flagged and
No, not at all.
Oh wow. Okay.
I have a visa, a reporter visa.
Okay.
It was always very important to me to get to be like totally above board uh, when I was going to Minnesota, to Minneapolis. So I signed up for a visa at the embassy, and it was expensive, like the process. But if I'm covering migrant issues and being around so much police, it's always been very important to me to stay above board. Um, and I'm also a tiny bit, I don't know, actually, maybe not. I was gonna say I've been more careful around the police, but like I got hurt. Like I was shoved around a lot, like I have a very particular style getting close to police. I like to use a wide lens, so
Mm.
you got to get in there.
Wow.
Um, but I think that communicates what's going on a little more when I'm closer to the action.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the ones that stood out to me was like when they're driving past and they have just like the pepper spray, like a crack throughout the
Yeah,
window, like so
yeah,
crazy. And then yeah, there's some crazy, very violent images. But yeah, my other one was I read this article maybe a year ago. It was by Ted Rutland. I'm sure you know him at
yeah,
Concordia. Um, and he was talking about how at the universities across Canada, the private security that are hired by the universities are working up to like the limits of their like jurisdiction essentially. And then the police come and like arrest like a pro-Palestine student or something like that. And then like but the police can only take it to a certain level. So then the private security comes in because they're paid by like a private person on like
yeah, yeah,
private property. And so
yeah.
it's kind of like what you were talking about at the beginning, where it's like this whole mess of private security firms working with the cops and then, but also ICE. It's just a crazy dynamic, this like securitization over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question for me because I've actually sued, well, not sued. I've done some pretty serious complaints against the BSP, the Bureau du Sécurité Privée in Quebec, because I was pretty gratuitously assaulted by some Concordia
Mm.
security guards, and that was actually the reason Ted wrote that article.
Oh,
Um,
fascinating.
they go so hard at Concordia in particular, my alma mater, but they don't seem to care. And I was working for CBC at that, not at that point, but like I was on assignment and my stuff showed up for CBC there. So they, as usual, they just like pretend everyone is an activist in a certain group. And I've seen them go way, 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 way beyond their mandate. Security guards in Quebec don't have any more power than you or I to do arrests and violence. Um, at Concordia, they have gone just over the top, as well as McGill from some things that I've seen. But it's actually been worse at Concordia. Tackling, punching, some very serious choke holds and um, arm positions where they could break your arm. I was covering the strike a couple months ago, uh, around October, and like these guys were tackling people in the street, and the cops would come after that. They would call them right as these instances were occurring. But yeah, it's so dystopian, apocalyptic to think that like, the fusion of this corporate world and the public world would happen, so soon. Like it's the kind of things they would show in like the 80s by like techno futurists.
Literally. Literally.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, I
But
don't.
this was like there was a whole different level. Like some of the worst violence I saw was from Geo Group. Like
Yeah.
the guy pepper spraying out the window, he was a friggin' security guard, you know? But he is also getting paid by the state. He's getting paid by the federal government. It was about $1 billion a year to run just that one facility. So I doubt this guy's getting paid that much. Probably all those profits are going to the the CEOs and the shareholders. It's a publicly traded company.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like because the police, I mean, obviously they're terrible, but they do have like a bit more accountability mechanisms than
Definitely. Yeah.
than these private companies that can just fold and start a new one. I mean, how do you know how long like Geo Group has been around?
No, I don't off the top of my head, but I mean, they don't. They could just emerge, during the Trump administration, and they're best friends. Like the Geo Group CEO just became the head of ICE, so it's quite a revolving door.
Really?
Um, yeah, it's quite a revolving door there. I mean, they're doing the bidding of whatever ICE wants, and it's probably at better cost as well. But I think at some point the liability isn't good. Like especially in Canada, in Montreal, Quebec, you have a ton of leeway to use force in basically any situation. We've seen like the lack of accountability through the Police Ethics Commission, or even the courts, the civil courts for that matter, with police accountability. But when it comes to private citizens of these security guards, there must be like so much less liability. It must be much easier for them to sue if any of these people get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I guess we'll just end it off there. Feel free to shout out anything where people can follow your work and all of that. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and definitely I'll keep you in mind. I always see your work around Montreal, and yeah, it's always very fascinating like this, and a lot of depth. Actually, that reminds me, one last question. So you're talking about there was so much press at Delaney Hall. I don't feel like I've seen anything. So is that just like because we're in Canada that we're not seeing that much, or are people just like not getting it published?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of the activists there were furious. Like there was one point where there's three New York Times photographers and one writer there.
Wow.
And some of the activists were like freaking out, being like, dude, why can't I see anything about like there's so many of you. You guys have taken like probably 2,000 photos combined. And I think that comes to like just the big ugly machine of news. Every story has to be this long. It has to have two photos. Like New York Times could be a front page thing about Delaney Hall, and they would have a single photo. Like for me, one of the big reasons of many that I do not work for Post Media or any of those, the two newspapers that are left in this country, is because I get to publish exactly the amount of photos that I want and tell the exact story that I want in a time frame that I want to. Like I was there a week ago. My story's not quite ready. Like that's fine. I don't have a freaking deadline to meet.
Mhm.
I don't have a word count to meet as well. My piece is probably going to be 2,000 words, and like that's fine. And I love the amount of uh, power I get. But to go back to your question, it's just like the big ugly machine of news. And a lot of people said to me that there was quite a bit of press immediately following the big violence because Minneapolis is still a big story, and they being like New York Times, the big ones, they saw echoes of Minneapolis there. And as soon as the tear gas dissipated, the pepper spray, the mass arrests kind of went down a bit, then they stopped showing that on the first and second page and started putting it into like, less words, less resources into these stories. But yeah, you'd have to ask them. I don't like them, won't work for them.
Yeah, very fair.
Yeah.
Yuri, one last very, very quick question.
Uh, just wanted to add that I've done some research into this, and this is why William got to have you on a 1+1. But photojournalism is actually the most censored form of journalism in corporate media, obviously, but also but just in general. Uh, Photojournalism is heavily censored. Many photojournalists have to go completely indie to even show like the horrors of wars and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
definitely.
And in a place like Canada, where so much of journalism is, you get the worst of both worlds with corporate journalism, but then the state like journalism of CBC. That's why somebody like a Scott Taylor, when he was actually reporting like how much of Afghanistan was just like like a crock of shit, and Canada wasn't winning. That's why he could get away with doing stuff like that, because he was in unembedded journalism, even though he works for a military magazine, which is selectively war at best. So
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
it
and
tends
in the
to
US, US is getting complete, and in the US, like we get the worst of both worlds because we have, you know, the state prisons, which are awful, and then the private security prisons of the prison industrial complex, which is just like, that on steroids. That the documentary on Netflix, the 13th, did a very good job of, exposing. But the Constitution is not going to save us. But that's a whole other topic altogether.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like it's so censored, but like to me, like even if it's not censored and they do show the most shocking image, there's still only one image, and that doesn't tell what happened. And like something I try to do in my reporting is like do like a play by play. Like I love hockey and I love describing how a game occurred like minute by minute. Like there was momentum change in the second period. Like, oh, and then the protest turned right on St. Catherine. Like that's always been important to me. And to like max out that carousel in Instagram or in Substack, like Substack's even better because there's absolutely no limit. So I can just, do a photo essay that's going to be 40 images. You're not going to get that in the New York Times. You're not going to get that even in independent media.
All right. Yeah, so feel free to shout out anything, William, and yeah, thank you so much. And after you speak, I'll just do a small announcement.
Cool. Yeah. My Substack is William Wilson Photography, and my Instagram is William Wilson Photography.
Brilliant.
Those are the only two places. I do not do Twitter. I don't do Facebook. I have a Blue Sky account, but I don't use it because it's boring. Um, yeah, William Wilson Photography. I appreciate everyone listening and all the really great questions. It's a super important story, and it's
Yeah,
not getting told that much in Canada. So yeah, I'm happy to have all your guys' ears and eyes.
yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, so just so everybody knows, coming up next week we have Professor Bill Carroll. We're going to be talking about is China's ecological civilization really eco-socialist? So that'll be super interesting, connected with the Canada-China Focus Institute. On Canada Day, we will have this session. We're going to do one on Canadian mythology with Eve Angler and Richard Sanders. Very much looking forward to that one. I think it might run a little bit longer than others. We'll see. And then July 8th, to coincide with the NATO conference that's happening in Turkey. We're going to be doing a Canada Out of NATO webinar with Owen Schock that just wrote an excellent book on NATO. Tamara Lawrence, who we all know, writes a lot on NATO and climate, and potentially somebody from Black Alliance for Peace. So yeah, looking forward to a lot that's coming up, as well as July 14th in Vancouver. There's a protest against the NATO Field School. That's like a university program, to kind of a pipeline to get university students to go into NATO positions. So there's going to be a protest against that because it's a summer program. And then as well on July 16th in Burnaby, an anti-NATO forum. So all of that's going to be coming on emails. You probably already got a little bit of it yesterday. But yeah, thank you so much, William. And yeah, we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Bye
Bye.
bye.